Good morning, good morning, folks. Sorry about my less than spectacular appearance, but day off. It's been an entire week of rain and off rain, so frizz and humidity, folks. Frizz and humidity. It's gonna make me nuts one of these days. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and yes, we are going back to that horrible world known as the JRC. But before we do, the usual disclaimers. I'm going to do these first three videos, and then, of course, as you know, I'm going to do that one rant video about all the stupid crap that's been going on during the week so that we don't have to tarnish these with my ranting. Anyways, in the description box, folks, you're going to find a link to the article that the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read. It's written by NeuroClastic, a small non-for-profit started by autistics for autistics, wherein they interviewed and surveyed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so-called behavior modification program. Matter of fact, the JRC doesn't want you to read this article so much. They've threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit. They did not remove it from the website. Well, folks, NeuroClastic has refused, so you know the drill. Please read the article and share it on all your social media. We also have included in there NeuroClastic's public statement in regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to their GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding in case the JRC actually sees through with their threat. Also included, as always, the Ozarks first article in regards to Agape Boarding School, also known as Stone for Help Boarding School, a so-called Christian-themed boarding school based out of Stockton, Missouri that takes in so-called troubled male teens that has impending over 21 civil lawsuits, claims, and allegations leveled against it, all which have been substantiated by the Missouri Department of Social Services, and they include the following: sodomy, rape, sexual assault, child abuse, psychological and emotional abuse, child trafficking, starvation, and that's just for starters. You have one former staff member arrested by the FBI, another a doctor still on the premises with full access to the boys, up on multiple, again, substantiated claims of sodomy, rape, and sexual assault of the boys there. You have an attorney general too busy chasing after and badly photoshopping drag queens instead of, doing that all important thing called his job. You got a governor off his nut, and you've got people firmly steeped in GOP Trump sphere hell. Hell. Those of us who are intelligent, who are stuck here, are not here by choice, folks. Send help. Read that article. Share it on all your social media. We got the other pertinent links, as always, to the Stop the Shocks campaign as well, including Hoya's massive archive on the subject, Jennifer Masamba's behavioral sheet of shockable offenses, a clip out of the 7-hour ordeal undergone by Andre McCollins back in 2002, the templates, and the ever-present, very self-explanatory Change.org Shut the Judge Rotenberg Center Down petition. When we discuss the JRC, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of peoples with disabilities being tortured and abused. If you do got young children present, folks, please go ahead and use those headphones, okay? Trigger warning, this channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, very obviously parental supervision is very much advised, all right? One of these days, I'm going to shorten down the disclaimers to just tell people to read the description box. We go a good 2 to 3 minutes every video. I'm beginning to sound monotone to myself, and that's kind of special. Maybe we'll start that on the next video, huh? All right, so where we left off last week. The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment also provides little recourse for students with disabilities injured by use of aversives. For the purposes of Equal Protection Clause, people with disabilities are not considered a suspect class. The effect of this is that government can treat people with disabilities differently than those without, so long as it has a rational, non-discriminatory basis for doing so. This is the tone deaf part of our society, folks, because what is considered rational is up for interpretation. Okay? This leaves way too much into the hands of the individuals who are supposed to be overseeing our care. You could arguably say that it is rational to send someone with the Hannibal Lecter-esque behavioral issues that they try to tape on us and that society buys as a whole, that it is rational to send us to places like the JRC and other places less severe to get rid of the behaviors. They don't care how the behaviors that make neurotypical society are gotten rid of, just as long as that they are. And if they can justify that with a rational argument about how we're so called out of control, you can use that to put a band-aid over a bunch of atrocities, folks. Okay? What is rational is the same conversation as what is normal. It's nothing but a consensus that is left open for interpretation. And when you do that, you can basically shove into a dark a whole series of bizarre atrocities. If you don't believe me, take a dig into the institutional era, where places didn't have to disguise themselves from being anything else other than an institution. But let's kind of go on here. As Heinemann establishes, providing acceptable care as part of a student's education, defined as the product of the sort of professional judgment discussed above, is considered a legitimate government interest that would satisfy the rational basis test. Again, this is this deference to people with letters behind their name that is dangerous. Okay? We have in this country this almost blind religious like trust to those with doctor's degrees. And we shouldn't, folks. They may have degrees, they may know more than we do in a particular subject, but these folks are not infallible. If they were actually infallible, things like malpractice suits wouldn't exist. Okay? We rely on professional judgment enough that we use it as a means to ignore the red flags when they pop up in our heads. Okay? But they're the professionals. They have to know better than me. That's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true at all. Okay? Blind trust in the medical model is just as bad as blind trust in politicians. Okay? It does no one any good. If you see those red flags, I don't care how many letters the so called professional has behind their name. More often than not, your gut instinct that something is very, very wrong is right. Okay? Don't let these people with letters behind your name lull you into a false sense of security and safety when every single red flag in the book is waving around you. Okay? We got to get out of this mentality because the medical model is not infallible. But let's move on. Thus, there would be few, if any, instances which a court working under the existing framework could find that the use of aversive with a child with a disability at school would violate the Equal Protection Clause. Again, this is the problem. This is why these laws that are there, supposedly for our protection, need to be more explicit. because we live in a world where you can't just safely believe the professionals. If you don't believe me, I know this is the Depp case again, but I'm sorry, the point is glaring. You have people like Dr. Jessica Taylor. Sounds professional, doesn't it? Right? This person has never practiced medicine within a clinical setting and has decreed that autism and ADHD do not exist, but are actually more misdiagnosed trauma responses. Okay? You can be a doctor with letters behind your name and be a complete moron. Excuse me if that term is ableist, but moronic, right? Moronic. When I've had doctors with multiple letters behind their name and I had to explain my own diagnosis to them, as well as the concept of person centered planning that I had been on since the beginning from when I got my diagnosis, yeah, you can't have blind faith, folks. I don't care if they are a doctor with multiple letters behind their name. Blind trust is going to goose step us all into hell. It is what it is. All this being said, where corporal punishment is arbitrary, capricious, or wholly unrelated to legitimate state goal of maintaining an environment conducive to learning, it can constitute a violation of a student's 14th Amendment and 5th Amendment substantive due process rights. For instance, in Jefferson versus Deslita Independent School District, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals held that the conduct of a teacher who had tied a second grader to a chair for 2 school days and denied her access to the bathroom was constitutionally impermissible. The teacher, the court held, should have been aware that the general legal principles did not allow for this type of treatment, which had caused the student emotional distress and humiliation, and which had impeded her learning. At the same time, the plaintiff had been restrained as part of some unspecified instructional technique, and the court implied that the inquiry would be quite different if she was instead being properly punished or disciplined by being tied to the chair. See, this is our problem, folks. This is our problem here. We're dealing with professionals who believe that it is okay to tie students to chairs. And as long as they present their argument correctly, as I'd like to say, use their right words, it's somehow permissible. You see what I mean? There's too much left up for interpretation. And I'm telling you, folks, if you give neurotypicals an inch, they're going to take a mile. All right? These laws got to get more defined. They got to get more specific. They got to get more detailed. Otherwise, although it looks great on paper, it's providing protection to no one, not even your neurotypical kids. Because remember, folks, there is a real concerted effort, especially in these states controlled by these MAGA GOP morons that are trying to bring corporal punishment not just to disabled folks, but to your neurotypical kids in public schools. That whole, well, it's okay, they're disabled now of control is coming back to bite you in the ass. All right? And what's even more amusing is that you thought that it wouldn't. That would never happen to my kid. Yeah, about that, Karen. Given the extra deference that courts tend to afford educators and treatment professionals with when it comes to addressing the needs of children with disabilities, it is highly likely that the use of aversives, that is to say restrictive measures imposed on for punitive reasons, would have to be downright egregious in nature. Excuse me, I can't say blah, blah. Obviously, blah, I'm not awake. In effect, in order to merit court intervention on constitutional grounds. So let's wrap this up here, shall we? Very obviously, one of the big elephants in the room is the fact that these types of laws that were put on the books supposedly for our protection leaves way too much open for interpretation. You can drive a massive semi truck through the holes, if you get what I mean. This is why these laws need to become more explicit, why the guidelines must become more explicit. Because as of right now, they're just on paper to look good. They do not really provide any kind of protection, not only to us, the disabled folk, but to your neurotypical kids as well. As you can see, is obvious as you have more and more schools bringing back corporal punishment and the paddle. We gotta get loud, folks. And it cannot just be the disability rights advocates and our allies that are pushing this. This got to get pushed from the outside world, or it's never going to go anywhere until it's all too late. And we're going to close out on that, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this morning. As always, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Bye-bye, everyone.